Welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things CEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, Cal, and I'm the only host today. I miss you, Alex. Anyways, I'm going to be joined today by Ken of Stacked EDH to discuss the work that preceded and has sprung from his video, The Truth About CEDH, a response to the command zone. Thanks for being here, Ken.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to chat today.
Excellent. It's great to have you here. Before we go any further, I wanted to talk quickly about our sponsors. They are TCG Player, Dragon Shield, and Patreon. If you're looking to get cards and you're not going to your local game store, give TCG Player a try for the best prices on the internet. When you receive those cards, make sure to protect them with Dragon Shield accessories, just like Playing with Power does with our very own personal collections. Also, you can even get your very own Playing with Power logo Dragon Shield sleeves on our website right now. After that, take those cards for a spin during our webcam leagues, tournaments, and game days over on our Patreon. You get all kinds of benefits for your direct support. Finally, our merchandise store is back. We did not like the quality of our last store, so we did some research and found a great new provider. The merchandise is much better in our opinion, and we are adding new designs all the time. Check out the podcast description for links to everything mentioned here today. And, as is tradition, Alex would normally say this, but I'm going to give a shout out to our Patreon, Eric Palmer. Thanks a lot, Eric, for supporting our channel and letting us do all the stuff we do, like record this podcast. All right, everyone. Thanks for sitting through those plugs. I'm sure you didn't hit that 15-second skip forward button like 2 to 3 times. It's great. It's great to have you back. So, yeah, exactly. So, yes, Ken, I have you here today to talk a little bit about a video you made a little while back now. Has 25,000 views, doing good for a long information-dense video. It's great.
Yeah, very long, yeah.
So, for anyone who might not have seen it, kind of the core concept of this video was that it is a response to a episode of the Command Zone, where they perhaps made... some could say a caricature of how CEDH as a format works, or perhaps a straw man. And Ken, you made this video. What was it specifically about the original Command Zone video that caused you to want to react to it? Like, what was that thought process like?
Yeah. So I want to start off by saying, and I say as much in my video, Mayan Words video, I think Josh and Jimmy, good intentions, good guys, they mean well, they provide for a lot, they're good guys. They do good work, and I like them. I'm pro Command Zone, pro Game Nights. But I think that in the process of trying to more precisely characterize what they want out of casual Commander games, they painted a little caricature, a funny little caricature of CDH decks. And that bugged me because I'm really firmly in both worlds. Like I'm a very dedicated casual player and brewer and content creator, a very dedicated competitive brewer, creator, content creator. And so I thought, I'm real sick of conjecture and just like talking anecdotally. And I want to get out of that realm, and I want to get more into the realm of, let's be empirical. Let's actually try to count things. And try to measure things faithfully and then see where that takes us. Because I think that CDH for a long time, as a sort of new competitive meta within the most popular Magic format, isn't yet in that sort of data-grounded empirical place. We're just sort of like rules of thumb, people being like, oh, that card's good, oh, that card's bad, that deck's good, that deck's bad. And it's all just sort of guts doing the talking. And I'm for guts doing the talking, but I like guts checked against the the lighter reason or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take the biggest sort of list of decks that I know work, right? That I know can sit down at a table with other competitively designed decks and have a good shot at winning. And I want to see what patterns emerge, just for my own sake, really. And then I'll take all of that and compare it to the Command Zone, because I had a hunch after watching their video that they were a little bit off in some respects. Mm-hmm. And so I solicited some help, and Mord or Mortiman _ on Twitter.
Yeah, shout out to Mord. Awesome dude.
Yes. Yehuda is a very good guy, and he he volunteered to help, and we worked our asses off on it. And he spent so much time and energy on this project, and I'm eternally grateful for him and his work. And we just got into it. And as we started to analyze these decks, more and more patterns began to emerge, and more importantly, more questions started coming to mind. And so we just tried to present a nice picture in a video and get people fired up enough to want to learn more.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. What was that kind of data collation process like? That seems like a lot of manual entry.
Yeah. It was a bunch of grunt work, and I think a fun story is like, each card. So each card in the card pool, composed of every card in every deck on the CEDH DDB, I wanted to assign a category to those cards, not just card types. We entered all that by hand too. Because we're dumb and didn't pull in just already extant database info. But I wanted to assign a card type to each card to sort of describe its effect. And so that involved me looking at all 1,500 plus cards and typing, this is a ramp spell, this is a draw spell, this is disruption, this is whatever. And the fun part was we did it once, and because we were still building the spreadsheet structures, something went wrong, and we had to re-import all of the data. I had to do it all over again. Just start again. So
that's so nice.
It was a lot of grunt labor, just blunt force labor. We just did it. But Yehuda did 99% of the architecture. I just came up with a lot of questions. So it was a lot of staring at spreadsheets and being like, I have this question. How do we convert this into spreadsheet talk? A lot of translation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What kind of data can we come up with to try to answer this question I have about CEDH deck list?
Exactly.
Deck building or so that they might have said on the command zone. What were some of those questions that you were interested in answering?
A lot. I think the core ones.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a leading question. A broad question.
The core ones were really just about deck, kind of broad patterns and deck construction. So the command zone, they have a template that they've put out a few different times in the last 5-6 years.
Revised it over time, yeah.
Exactly. And so I took their last one and just sort of used that as a benchmark, assuming that a lot of casual players watch their stuff and try to build using that template. I know I did. So I was like, oh, I can't be the only one, right? So I looked at those breakdowns, how many draw spells, how many disruptive spells, whatever. And then I looked at the comparison to sort of the averages of all the decks on the DDB. And just put those numbers side by side. And I wanna say one thing about the video, a very helpful clarification that a lot of folks in the comments brought up is because I am neither a mathematician nor a data analyst nor a smart person, I used a percent difference calculation to express the difference between how many ramp spells in a casual deck, how many ramp spells in a competitive deck on average. I should have just shown a percentage change. It would have been a much simpler calculation, but I think the good news is that the data is all public. And so anybody who has that kind of question can very, very easily find those answers and plug in and use the sort of analytical moves that they want to. But so we just looked at, the differences, and we started to see some sort of obvious differences emerge that we just sort of knew as CDH players. And then we also started to see some overlap that was pretty surprising. Where I was like, oh, wow, like this is the same format, absolutely. But there are moments where the metas sort of are almost like one-to-one. They're more similar than they are dissimilar. And that was very surprising to me.
Yeah, what kind of areas was that in? What kind of stuff popped out at you and you said, wait a second, we've been playing casual EDH all along?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Really, I'd say the biggest overlap was in the amount of disruption that the casual command zone template recommends and then the average CDH deck includes. And I'll dig up the real numbers in a second, but the difference was very slight. And that was very surprising to me because I associate in my mind in my memories of CDH games of, oh man, they're very interactive, right? They're very disruptive. Everybody's constantly fiddling with each other's plans.
And there's kind of a caricature of casual EDH in that there's never any interaction. People want to sit around and play their big bombs, and no one has an answer, and then everyone's sad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is sort of a chicken and the egg thing, because I know the Command Zone has over time recommended, right, running more and more interaction. So I think that they're sort of going with the flow, so to speak, towards the competitive pole, just as more people kind of naturally gravitate there. But so it's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing, but still, that was very surprising to me. I also sort of my original premise before looking into the data, and then I just kind of tried to abandon all my premises, just see what I saw, was like, okay, yes, CDH does more stuff sooner, more fast mana, absolutely, but mana sources is probably about the same, and that wound up being true too. The casual recommendation was like about 48 mana sources, and on average, CDH decks have about 49. And so the tempo is different, but much like the interaction thing, the tempo is different, but the quantities aren't that different, which I think is an important thing to know to try to bust down these caricatures and start actually being precise when we talk about what the pros and cons of each playstyle are,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that this touches a little bit on what you focused on for a good chunk of the video, which was kind of talking about CEDH myths, whether it be everybody plays Dockside. Surprise, like 95% of red decks play Dockside. Or everyone plays Birds of Paradise. Surprise, only 50% of the decks that can play Birds of Paradise do. I was shocked by that. But you're talking about tempo there and all that kind of stuff. I did find conversation interesting in the video about their caricature about CDH ending on turn 1, turn 2, and then in comparison, they might claim that casual games end on turn 5 or 6, which was a big premise of their original video to begin with, because the original video was about how, dear Wizards, please stop designing really, really fast Magic cards. Commander is getting fast, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Do CDH games end on turn 2 or 3? Do casual games end on turn 5 or 6?
Well, I mean, one thing is that they had said 7 or 8. They thought that
okay,
gone are the days.
My bad.
No, but it's not that it's not that big of a difference, right? Yeah. We pulled in and have been working a little bit, and I'll talk about this more later on. We've been working with James, aka Squirrel Mob, who runs the CDH Metagame Project, and that's the best available resource we have to count right now when games tend to end. And he found that turn 5 is the modal turn, and I think it even shifted into turn 6 for one of the updates. So I thought, okay, like turn 5 and turn 7. That isn't, at least in my mind, that's not a big difference, right? Like, and I think, again, this is sort of chicken and the eggy. I think that chicken and the eggy being my new adjective. But I think that, right, the Command Zone.
I think you're on use 3.
That's not gonna. So the number's gonna go up. Just wait. I think the Command Zone has over time. They showcase more efficient, more consistent decks that tend to be a little bit more competitively designed, at least in my mindset, from my viewpoint. So I think that they inflect what they see, and particularly in their meta too, right? They're going to influence their environment. They're not just like passive participants that plug in. So I think that, their view might be a bit skewed to a certain kind of meta, certain kind of play style among enfranchised players, probably for the most part. So that I thought that regardless, noting that tempo difference is good, because then that lets us start asking questions about, like, well, do we want to try to define for ourselves, like, what temporally is an ideal distance between how long a casual game takes, at least in terms of turns, and how long a competitive game takes. And if not, if that seems kind of like a worthless exercise, what's that tell us about why are we even asking this question? All right, why do we care about it? What do we imagine its meaning is?
Yeah, I do more and more have an idea floating around in my head that a focus on when a game ends might be a bit of bringing a too competitive mindset to EDH. I am simultaneously becoming more and more militantly casual and competitive at the same time, depending on what I'm playing in EDH and where my thoughts are going.
Yeah.
I am becoming more and more convinced that if we thought less about when casual EDH games are ending and focus more on what in those games is causing fun or not, then we could probably have a bit more of a productive conversation around that.
Yeah, it's a little weird to be like, to make an analogy, right? To drop one that's rough, but I think it serves our purposes here. It'd be a little weird to, when somebody asks you, hey, what kind of movies do you like? To say like, I like movies that are about 2 hours and 15 minutes. People would be like, are you an alien?
Well, I say that, but that's because my mind is broken and I can't stay focused for that long. I'll just leave.
There you go. See, but that
no,
is.
I'm kidding.
That's like a good exception, though. It's like
that's because I'm mentally ill, Ken.
Me too. Certified, clinically mentally ill. But like it's just sort of odd, right? Like, what are we actually wanting out of this experience? Do we want something that is, checks all these sort of quantitative boxes, or are we looking to make sure that people have good experiences qualitatively? And then the numeric qualities, when the game ended, how many spells were cast before turn 3 or whatever, those become secondary, or those become sort of tertiary to the problem at hand, which is, can we have fun? Can we have fun and like have shared expectations? Yes or no?
Yeah, and it definitely could be said that the game ended before anyone really got to do anything, and therefore that was not fun. But
yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's qualitative, right? Because then it's like, oh, the game didn't work.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Everybody didn't have a shot at affecting it. Thus, the game didn't work. So try again or modify your situation.
Yeah, that certainly makes a lot of sense. This isn't just a podcast about CEDH. Did you know this is about our favorite format, EDH? That's what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
I did want to circle back all the way back to what we were talking about before we started talking about this. CEDH myths, as a generalized topic, there is the thought out there that exists in people who, both outside and inside of CEDH, that CEDH really is kind of just a game of Thoracle combos and Grixis piles, or like Sans Green, Timna Crom, Blue Farm, just kind of beating up everybody. And even if they're like not the best decks, they're what you're always going to play against and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, this isn't exactly all you see on the decklist database, because the decklist database does accept a wide range of commanders and strategies in order to more fully represent what people are looking at and working on, and to give you kind of an idea of what you could do. And so I wanted to dig a little bit into something you harped on for a while in the video, which was the concept of like uniqueness between different CEDH decks.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we looked at the card pool, right? And we counted up all the cards, and we found like it's over 1,500 cards that comprise all the DDB decks, right? And out of curiosity, I was like, okay, what percentage of the total legal card pool is that? Because I wanted to compare that percentage to the percentage of cards played in formats like Modern or Legacy or Vintage or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we found that the card pool is about 7% of all legal EDH cards, and that's very similar to Modern's card pool. And so I thought, okay, so that's kind of a useful analogy, right? For people to wonder about how unique is the format, or rather, how unique is the meta of CEDH within the format of EDH. And if you think Modern, has an interesting card pool, interesting enough to sustain your interest, then you might feel similarly about the CEDH metas that exist. In doing that, in assessing that card pool, we found a ton of cards that were unique to one deck in the DDB. And let me pull up the contemporary count of those cards, we found that there are, at least right now, according to the current data from the January something DDB update, not the one that we discussed in our video, there are 557 cards that are unique to one DDB deck at the moment. And so that's about a third of the card pool for the DDB list in total. And then we thought, okay, well, wait a minute. We've got this list of unique cards. Now we can sort by percentage unique, right? We can find the decks with the most unique cards. And that was very fun and very useful because it revealed some, what felt to me like outliers, right? Like decks that aren't going to just be slamming Thoracle and all the 5-color good stuff disruption to protect it, right? These are going to be cards where you're seeing like Bloodline Dwarf or Fiery Tempest or, whatever. You just fill in the blank. And so we use that as a way to look at various decks and assess their, how if the spirit of casual EDH, if that mindset is defined by novelty, I want to see novel situations. And if the OG DNA of the format is wide card pool, right? Play as many cards as you want, and they don't have to be generically good, then how much of that translated into the established CDH meta? And so, we found some outliers. Like Anya is the big one. Anya has, I think, 35 unique cards that are only in Anya. And surprise, surprise, they're all the Madness cards. And then Magda.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Magda, Clock Combo, surprise, surprise, has a lot of dwarfs that you just don't see elsewhere because they don't do much other than tap to make a mana in that deck. Or make a treasure. But we can sort that entire database by that. So if people are curious about that, and if they want to brew or choose a deck, proxy it up, buy it, whatever, and say, I want to play the most unique deck or one of the more unique decks, now we have a way to find out what that is. And again, this is the DDB, right? So it is sort of, in one sense, arbitrarily heterogeneous. It's not, many local metas, I'm sure, are just a lot of blue farm and a couple decks that aren't that. But in my experience in Santa Fe, that was never the case. I live and love some true freaks, and we get into weird stuff up here in the mountains. And so I was like, man, my CDH experience has never been really homogenous. We're always on the fringes. And so it was nice to see that, maybe other people have a similar experience, and then what does that actually look like numerically?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can you give listeners who may not have watched the videos, can you give them a little bit of an idea of like how many cards kind of were average unique for decks and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull it up. Give me just a second.
It's time to pull up the data.
Oh my God, I know. I have it in a document here. And this is a preview of the future. I'll just vamp while I look. A preview of the future is that we're building out a database to constantly update this project and also to be able to import more and different data sets. So this is going to be a continually updated resource. It's going to be available freely, and it's going to be the kind of database that you will be able to ask questions of. You'll be able to log in, make an account, and say, hey, I want to poke around in here and play around with this and ask questions and find patterns myself, and you're going to be able to do that. So for the November DDB meta, the average amount of unique cards... Oh God, that's a phone going off. I must kill that. Hold on just a second. Okay, that had to die. The average amount of unique cards that were in a tournament winning deck, I'll start there because we use the very lovely resource that budgetbrews.club. They keep track of CDH tournament results, and so we had those winners when we built this first version of the database. The average amount of unique cards in a tournament winning deck, and this is I think to me it seems a little disheartening, this number, is 5. And in non-tournament winning decks, that number goes down to 3. 3 on average, which really tells you how much of an outlier decks like Anya and Magda are.
Yeah, I was about to say decks like Omen Pool and Anya and Magda are definitely bumping up that average a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. When we took away Anya from the winning decks, because Anya has won a tournament, the average became 4. So that tells you how much that disproportion affected the general curve. But that's the kind of flip side, right? Hey, a third of the card pool is unique to one given deck, but on average, each deck has a very small number of cards that are unique.
Yeah, and do you think that in some ways, when you're looking at that number, your definition of unique, like kind of shot you in the foot like a little bit, because obviously there are some CDH decks on the database that are using really weird cards that no other deck is using. Other decks other than Krark are not playing Tavern Scoundrel.
Yeah.
But there's like 2 to 3 Krark decks on the database, so Tavern Scoundrel's not a unique card.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think that I think one thing about the DDB to keep in mind is that it is always going to be that kind of resource. It will always collate and collect lists and follow people's interests because it's volunteer run, people submit to it, so it's always going to follow a little bit a trend or a series of trends. And so, yeah, cards like Tavern Scoundrel, I think it's pretty unique, but again, there are 2 and will probably be 3 Krark lists on the damn database soon. So then suddenly things start to look more homogeneous.
Whose fault is that?
What a loon who does such work.
Somebody's out here proselytizing Krark aggressively on the internet.
What a freak. What a mentally ill what a certified mentally ill person with thumb tattoos would do that. That's weird. That's really weird.
What kind of certified mentally ill freak from Santa Fe?
I know. It's crazy. I got to find that person, Got to tell him what's up.
Tell him, hey, too many people are playing Krark.
That's right. But yeah, so that was one consideration when we started to look at the actual trying to quantify what makes something feel unique.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That was a very small bit of criticism that I had in my head when I was watching the video.
Yeah.
Did you get any kind of other criticism back from people and all that kind of stuff, or
yes,
that you've thought about more, or that you have a not canned answer? It's a PR response for Ken.
No PR response, really. I mean, we did get a lot of criticism. Surprise, surprise. We released a video on the internet and made claims that we were confident about. Thus, everybody was like, no, you're wrong and bad. That's not true. Most people came at it with a good attitude. They're charitable and gracious and still were critical. I think that's the good mode to be in. But I think the most important point, and something that we didn't really address in our video and should have, is we didn't assign a weight to each deck. And what I mean by that is we didn't assign a likelihood or a probability that any given deck would probably be in a certain meta or a certain pod within a meta. And so people were like, look, yes, the outside perception of CDH is that it's homogenous. Even some inside perceptions, right, is that it's homogenous because you sit down and the odds are going to be quite high, given the prevalence of these cards and strategies, that there will be at least one Turbonauz deck, at least one Thoracle deck, at least one Breach deck, or whatever, right? These sort of popular strategies, you're going to at least see one, if not 2, or even 3 decks that do that, right?
In the average game or whatnot. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that is something we didn't discuss, and we should have, and that's absolutely correct. And I think that that sort of speaks to a possibility in the future of CDH metas, and particularly with regards to CDH events like the MLC, is conscious curation for deck diversity within metas and within pods and within events. I think we'll probably see more of that going forth, and not rely on sort of the non-commander understanding of being competitive, which is find something you enjoy playing, but for the most part, make sure it's within kind of a narrow band of being viable. And that's why you get tournament reports that say like, okay, 30% or 20% or, but people were on this deck or whatever, 25% on Blue Farm or whatever. And that's like in Modern or in Legacy, like 15% on Delver or whatever. But I think that we're going to see people move away from that consciously and say, okay, I want to make sure that when I sit down in a pod, it's not 3 turbo decks and then my 1 stacks deck, but what does sort of an ideal pod composition look like? And how do we make sure that we're surprising ourselves and we're keeping it fresh?
Mm-hmm. I think that's definitely one of the advantages that CEDH has as a format. We talk about the format a lot in the context of tournaments and as if it's like a truly completely competitive pursuit. But the name lies a little bit because when we play CEDH, we're all trying to win and we're trying to make the best plays possible and all that kind of stuff. But so often CEDH is played in a completely casual environment. You're sitting down with buddies IRL or friends on the internet and that kind of stuff, and you're just trying to have a fun time while also doing this really cool version of Commander. And I think so often how that can work out sometimes is like I personally, like if I were to go to a tournament, I would probably play something like Blue Farm, but I don't have like Blue Farm sleeved up right now, even though I probably am like in the top 5% of people who have played CEDH games in the last month for like amount of time spent playing CEDH, because it's like, it just gets old. And like, I know people that I play with don't want to see Blue Farm every time. I don't want to play Blue Farm every time. So I play other stuff like Elves and Shurikai now I just sleeved up, yada, yada. Nice. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are still going to make aesthetic choices more so in EDH than in other formats because, again, it's in the DNA of the format. And that's okay. I think that's okay to lean into that because then that lets us ask the question of, okay, like what do we actually want from CEDH? Do we want it to be a good, healthy tournament thing? Right? Or do we want it to be...
I don't know if it'll ever be that.
I personally don't think so. I think it'll wind up being more like entertainment, right? That'll be the name of the game. It's primarily entertainment first for viewers and participants, and then playing as competitively as possible, as tightly as possible, given the things you like to play, will be what competitive means. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 10 years from now, we'll be like boomers, and all the kids will be like, 80% of us are on Blue Farm version 8.0, like, or whatever, like Azure Farm, and we're just like, I like my Yisan deck, and everybody will be like, okay, Grandma, go to bed or whatever. But I doubt
Yisan is a great way to get into the CEDH format. It can be built for under $500.
They'll be like, we don't have money in the future anymore. We're all using Ripple. We're all using edgelord Bitcoin, edgelord cryptos, and proxying up the future. I don't know what it's gonna be.
Back in my day, Blue Farm was the best deck, and yet it never won a tournament.
I love that meme too, and that's also something, right? We tracked, and we're gonna continue to track. Is like actually see what's winning events. So it's not just like, oh yeah, duh, Blue Farm's the best deck. But be like, well, is it? Like, no, actually, like, A, define what best means for you, and then B, if you use tournament results, is it? And we'll be able to answer that question and not just bullshit. And I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, I cannot wait for there to be more and more and more tournament data. We talked about that in the last episode of the Playing with Power podcast. Where we talked to Mikey T.O. of the Playing with Power tournament that we just held last month. We're talking about that a little bit, and talking about CEDH tournament data is kind of weird because there's a lot of stuff you can draw from it. But due to the nature of the format and how few tournaments there are and stuff, you kind of have to be careful about how you use it. Like, right, you can kind of sit there and you can celebrate. Okay, we were joking earlier. Ken, mega Krark aficionado and fan. Ken likes to highlight that Krark does very consistently well in tournaments.
Yeah.
Maybe not spiking a tournament, but boom, another tournament, boom, top 16, top 4, top 16, 2 decks in the top 16, boom, 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 that kind of thing. And I think I cannot wait for us to have more and more tournament data to look at like that. Because, man, the more we have to look at over time, the more we can draw more accurate conclusions about a very variance-filled format.
Yeah, absolutely. Extremely I mean, that's the thing, too. Like, I think we have to, despite, Yehuda's and I's efforts and James's efforts and Timmy T1000 and Joe King's and everybody's, I think we have to be real careful with our conclusions because this is, right, Magic is already incalculably complex. And 4-player multiplayer Magic with politics and 100-card singleton decks is going to be exponentially more incalculable than one-on-one. So we are defined by variance, and we have to be careful about what conclusions we draw, which I think is good, because I think that means that people will be, hopefully, as time goes by, more tentative about tossing off sort of gatekeepy phrases like, oh, this is the best deck. If you're not playing this, you're not even trying to compete or whatever. And, and a little bit more humble and a little bit more open to knowing that, variance can make or break a game for somebody. Sometimes you just RNG out of a playable hand or somebody politics real well, and that's that, And that's part of the allure. It's not a downside. Yep. It's a pro.
For sure. Well, Ken, we've kind of been talking all over the place here, but, I love that this video that you and Mortimer and other people who helped you out with data and stuff sat down and started to make as a response to the command zone and, exploring this want and need, apparently, a need to better understand how CEDH deck building works and what people are doing out there and that kind of stuff. I love that it's kind of very rapidly has grown into more than that. Rather, it went from wanting to respond to a video and understand to how can we understand more? How can we build resources for people to understand more? How can we equip people to make these decisions and stuff? And I know you vamped about it a little bit earlier while you were looking up other stuff, but would you like to speak about that push a little bit more?
Absolutely. So I solicited help from some developers on Twitter, and a lovely person named Mino reached out and offered to help, and they have just been kicking ass. And so we are, Yehuda and Mino and I and James as well, we are all sort of working together to build a database, again, that will be public. It will be publicly available. We plan to, surprise, surprise to the DDB folks, Sinestra, et cetera. If y'all are listening to this, well, here's a preview of what you're going to see in your inbox soon enough. But we plan to reach out to the DDB folks and say, hey, we have this database. It's ready to go. Do you want to point to it or have it be a tab on the website or whatever? But we plan to just keep it continually updated and make it user-friendly. And again, I'll make a platform that people can use to indulge their curiosity. Because I think that's ultimately what the DDB is. It's a pedagogical tool. It's to help teach people and show people what's possible. And I think we just are taking that logic to its next step, to show people what's possible and to show people what to expect when playing competitively. And so that's going to come out soon. We're not at showtime yet, but we are building out the database. It's all looking really good. I sent you a screenshot that, I hope that you can put up here and share with the YouTube viewers. This isn't finalized design front end wise, but it just gives you a picture of sort of here's the back end, here's the database, and here's what we're doing with it. And I'm really excited to release it. And if you have any ideas, listeners, viewers, if you have any ideas about questions that we should ask of our data or ways that we can expand and find more data and more databases, folks that we should talk to, let me know. We have been talking constantly with folks like Joe King and the DDB folks and whatever. So we're in contact with the big players who are they're working we're all kind of chipping away in the same mine. But hit me up with resources because I want to make this the community's product, really, not just my nerdy indulgence.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait to see when it comes out, how it looks. I can't wait to play around with it. I'm not a numbers guy, but I do love messing around with stuff like that.
Yep, same.
But yes, to our listeners, how do you think about your casual and competitive EDH deck building? Are they the same? Are they different in your mind? Do you kind of think about in some of these caricature ways about casual players or CEDH players that we've talked about a little bit here? And have your thoughts been challenged in those ways? What do you think about all of our rambling? I don't know. We'd love to hear about it. No matter what you have to say, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah.
If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're on Twitter, add us or something. But yeah, Ken, I'd like to thank you again for coming on today and telling us all about this awesome work being done in the community, and a little bit of the thought process behind this video that you and Mord put together. Somebody has to crunch those numbers. I know I sure can't. And, apparently you can't either for percentile difference.
Yeah, I know. Me neither. I was like, man, this is...
I
was like, man, we are not data analysts, and we're just doing
I am not
this.
in numbers.
But you know, that's like, hey, man, sometimes you gotta...
Tell our listeners...
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, you just gotta, you want to do it, and you gotta do it, and you just want to do it. So you did it. Nobody else did it. You did it.
I know. There you go. That's how it goes.
So, as the guy who did it, where can our listeners find you?
Yes.
Around the internet.
So I run the channel Stacked EDH. We make videos about Commander, both casual and competitive, on YouTube. All kinds of videos, deck techs, video essays, piloting and politicking advice, edited gameplay, etc. You can find us on YouTube. I'm on Twitter. I talk too much there about Krark and about format philosophy and about making stupid decisions, re purchasing cardboard. And, you know, we're on Instagram and blah, blah, blah too. But really, find me on Twitter, send me an email, or leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. And yeah, let's make it work. Let's do stuff to make the community more accessible, more inclusive, and more empirical. We can do it. Let's do it.
Heck yeah. Those are great goals. In addition to a big thanks to Ken, a big thanks again to all of our sponsors, TCG Player, Dragon Shield, and viewers and listeners like you on Patreon. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a comment. We've already said that like 3 times. Like this video and subscribe if you're already not a subscriber. Make sure if you're listening, give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast aggregator. You would be surprised how much it helps. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and more. All the links are in the episode notes. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time. Poggers.